Welcome in, y'all. This is Gagefield AI kicking off Season 1 on Thanksgiving afternoon out here in Gage, Kentucky. You just saw us standing on foot taking in the yard, and that's on purpose. We're gonna treat this like a fresh farm tour before we ever fire up a tractor.
I'm Casey, your co-pilot for the chaos, and yeah, I love that we started with a stroll instead of mashing throttle. With that big cornfield 80 sitting ripe and all this green and yellow iron parked around, how long do you think we actually stay out of a combine?
As we kept walking that yard, you could really see how this Gage map hugs that Highway 286 and Gage Road corner. Kinda spooky how close it is to the real place. Feels like a true Thanksgiving farm tour before we ever even smell diesel.
Yeah, this is that post-turkey stroll where instead of football, you're window shopping combines. I'm already side-eyeing those Macs and trailers though. When we finally crack into Field 80, which truck do you lean toward hauling that first load to Gage grain?
As we drifted out toward the edge of the yard, you could see that Mac Anthem sitting just off the drive like it's begging to be first string to Gage grain. That's such a real Thanksgiving move too. Walk off the turkey, then end up leaning on a truck talking about corn prices.
Yeah, that's the I'm just gonna go check something walk that turns into a 2-hour visit by the shed. If this was your real family farm on Highway 286, you grabbing the close Mac by the house, or hiking back to those other rigs piled up in the back lot.
Back there, you could see us just parked on foot by that Gage grain and nutrient sign, like we're casing the joint. And honestly, that's what a good Thanksgiving harvest day feels like. Half logistics meeting, half family walk. This corner's basically the finish line for every Field 80 corn run we're dreaming up.
Yeah, that little gravel throat out to the blacktop is where all the stories end. Remember that year the line was clear around the curve? I'm already picturing that close Mac Anthem easing up this road with the first load, cab full of leftover Thanksgiving pie.
Over the last few minutes, y'all saw us swap from walking to absolutely letting that Super Duty eat down these Gage back roads. And that's such a real move. Gotta feel the curves and pavement before you start dragging a loaded grain trailer through here.
Yeah, doing 70 plus at a pickup makes those little jogs and mailboxes feel a whole lot tighter. I'm already thinking about how different that same stretch from Field 80 to Gage grain's gonna feel when it's a Mac Anthem with a mower behind it, full of Thanksgiving corn.
As that Super Duty eased off the hammer and rolled past the Blue Roof gas station, you could really feel how Gage tightens up near town. Those same curves you just flew through are gonna feel real different with a mower full of corn trying to stop at that intersection.
Yeah, that's where the fun run turns into, please don't miss the driveway. Once we swing this thing back toward the yard and wake a combine up for Field 80, I want to see if we still feel brave about hauling past those mailboxes with a full hopper chasing us.
Over the last few minutes, you've seen us trade that Super Duty Sprint for some seat time in the S770. And that's kind of the perfect Thanksgiving curve. Blow the cobwebs out on Highway 286, then settle in and let a green machine nibble on some corn by Field 80.
Yeah, that cab jump feels real. 1 second, you're flying past the Blue Roof station. Next, you're creeping a header along thinking, this little 14-acre block's gonna pay for my fuel, and maybe those goat milk and wool pallets turn into the Christmas money fun.
As y'all saw, we finally quit pretending this was just a Sunday drive and let that S770 lean into Field 80 a little, just skimming some corn off that edge. For a roughly 14-acre block, this size combine is kinda perfect. Big enough to feel serious, small enough you're not drowning in grain on day one.
Yeah, that felt like the classic Thanksgiving compromise. I'm just gonna grab a few headland passes before dessert. Once that hopper creeps up a bit, I'm already picturing which Mac we volunteer for first duty, so we're not dragging the wrong truck past those tight mailboxes.
Over the last little bit, y'all watched that S770 just tiptoe along the tree line by the home place, basically scratching a zipper into that first strip of corn. That's exactly where a machine this size shines, on a 14-acre block. You're not buried in grain, but it still feels like real work, not a demo day.
Yeah, and that edge is no joke. Trees on one side, drop off the other. You could almost hear the mirrors flinch on those turns. Once we've got a couple laps carved in, I'm already eyeing which Mac gets to idle up by the driveway while those goat milk and wool pallets start plotting Christmas money.
Over the last little stretch, you could see that S770 hopper just nudge up into the teens while we traced that home place tree line. And that's kinda the whole point. Spend a little time carving a safe zipper now, so every pass later is just straight lines and less mirror clenching.
Yeah, once that edge is tamed, the rest of Field 80 turns into put on a podcast and chew corn. And while that takes creeping up, I'm already thinking background money. Goat milk, wool pallets, all the little checks that hit while the Mac's out playing hero on Thanksgiving loads.
Over that last stretch, you could see us just living in the cab, letting the S770 trace that outside row and sneak the hopper up into the teens. And that's textbook. Once you've got a clean zipper along a tree line, the rest of this home block turns into easy, straight podcasts and coffee corn.
Yeah, this is the do the hard, slow stuff while the tank's still light phase. Once that zipper's stitched and we finally holler for a Mac and Mauer, I want to talk about what gets first dibs on the goat milk and wool money. Seed, shiny toys, or maybe a little Thanksgiving splurge.
Over those last passes, you could see that S770 hopper creep up into the mid-20s just from babysitting that tree line. And that's perfect. That first quarter tank is basically a free sample on Field 80's yield before we ever wake a Mac up by the driveway.
Yeah, it's like a Thanksgiving taste test for corn. Let me grab a scoop off the edge before we plate the whole meal. Once we know what that first quarter looks like on the ticket, I'm real curious which Mac anthem gets voted first run to Gage grain.
Over that last clip you watched, the 770 slide back into the main Gage farm like it owns the place. Then tuck right up against those woods on Field 80 and build that first quarter hopper. That's our free sample tray on this home corn block before we ever send a ticket to Gage grain.
Yeah, that little zipper along the gravel lane is doing double duty, opening the field up and telling us if this is pay the bills corn or goat milk and wool money gets to buy toys corn. Once we've tasted this first quarter, I'm ready to start a draft on which Mac gets Thanksgiving load number 1.
Over the last few minutes, you've kinda seen the perfect split shift. AI babysitting that S770 on Field 80 while we hop back in the Super Duty and go blast another lap past the 8R and sprayers, scouting where a Mac and Mauer are actually gonna park by that driveway.
Yeah, I love
Over that last bit, you could see us loafing the Super Duty along by Field 85 like it's the committee chair for parking and mailbox safety, while AI just keeps the S770 chewing up home place corn. That's peak Thanksgiving farming. Pickup doing what-if laps, combine doing the actual work.
Yeah, this is the family meeting on wheels. If we park the Mac here, can Grandma still get the mail? While that hopper sneaks toward halfway, I'm eyeing those goat milk and wool pallets like envelope money. Little quiet checks that buy toys after the big corn tickets clear.
Over these last few clips, you've basically watched us turn Field 80 into the main event and Field 85 into the parking committee, with AI just grinding that S770 up toward a half tank in the background. That's the dream. Home place corn paying the bills while we scheme truck drafts and mailbox safety laps in the Super Duty.
Yeah, and the best part is that side hustle brewing out by the dairy, goat milk pallet already full, little starter wool pallet waking up. Feels like the plan is big green iron pays the note, and the critters quietly buy the winter upgrades and maybe one shiny toy off the dealer lot.
Over the last few clips, you've basically watched the Super Duty doing science at an unsafe speed. Over the last few clips, y'all saw that Super Duty absolutely flying past Field 85. Y'all just watch that Super Duty absolutely scream past Field 85. And I'm laughing, because you can almost feel how wrong that would be with a mower full of corn behind a Mack. Those little dips and driveways along 286 will shove a loaded trailer around like a Labrador on a hardwood floor.
Yeah, in the pickup, it looks harmless. But picture 30,000 pounds of corn pushing you when you tap the brakes by somebody's mailbox. That's where goat milk and wool money pays for good rubber and brakes, not just shiny chrome.
While that Super Duty was floating along by Field 85, all light and happy, I kept thinking about how different it feels when you hang a 28-foot mower on a Mack bumper. Every dip on 286 turns into a little roller coaster where the trailer's trying to write its own story.
And the story usually starts with, why does my coffee suddenly live on the dashboard? That's why I like that we've got goat milk and wool checks coming in. Boring money that buys shocks, bushings, and alignment instead of just another chrome visor.
What I love about that whole rip past Field 85 is it's basically driver's ed for This is Gagefield AI back with you. Thanksgiving afternoon in Gage, Kentucky. And we're treating this whole save like a fresh start. One big home corn block on Field 80, an S770 hired hand chewing away, and a driveway full of Macks and Morers, just waiting to earn their turkey and dressing.
And I'm Casey, happily supervising from the passenger seat while that Super Duty pretends Field 85 is a racetrack. We've got goats paying the brake bill, wool buying chrome, and at some point today, we got to crown one Mack as the official Thanksgiving corn hauler to Gage grain.
Watching that Super Duty stretch its legs by Field 85 just makes me picture the next step, easing a clean Mack and Mower out of the home place. Signal on, nose pointed toward Gage grain for that first Thanksgiving corn run, like it's a parade float made of chrome and number 2 yellow.
And every parade needs rules, right? I want to know your load one ritual. Do you creep through the Gage grain driveway like a church parking lot? Or give it a little Jake break growl so Grandma hears you over by Mosstown Road and knows the corn money's on the move?
You know what that Super Duty sprint by 85 made me think of? On our farm, Thanksgiving afternoon turned into leftover logistics. Grandma would send a foil-wrapped plate to every truck. So you're eating cold turkey and pecan pie with one hand while you baby a full hopper down those skinny roads.
cold dressing on a plastic fork while you're trying not to spill gravy on the shifter. That's the real hard mode. I want to know which Mac gets the honor plate this year. The shiny MP8 show pony or the rougher one that already has cranberry sauce in the cup holder from last season?
Rolling down Mosstown instead of 286 kind of feels like the thinking lane to me. You've got that finished wheat on 85 out the window, S770 humming on 80 back yonder, and your brain's free to sketch the whole first corn haul like a little map in the windshield.
Yeah, Mosstown's the planning road. You can almost see the route. Ease off 80 by the home place, catch the blacktop, snake past those trees, then drop into Gage grain like you meant to do that all along. Only question is, which Mac gets to make that first grand entrance?
Sitting in that bare MP8 anthem, you can almost feel the ghost of the Mauer back there already, like you're rehearsing with an invisible trailer. In my head, the first run leaves field 80 easy, taps the brakes by that leaning mailbox on 286, then just rolls smooth into Gage grain like we've done it 100 times.
Holiday hauls always start that way. Empty truck, big plans. Then suddenly, it's dark, it's drizzling, and you're easing 30,000 pounds past somebody's Christmas inflatables. I want to hear which run like that made you swear you'd never again trust a wet shoulder.
That empty Mac and Maurer easing out of Willtown onto Mosstown is like the starter pistol for this harvest. Once the road rig leaves the yard, we're not just daydreaming routes anymore. We're on the clock to meet that S770 before the tank hits "I'm full, come get me" panic mode.
Yeah, this is the part where you find out if you're a dispatcher or just a guy with a pretty truck.
This is Gagefield AI. Welcome to Season 1 out here in Gage, Kentucky. Thanksgiving afternoon. Corn standing tall on Field 80, an S770 hired hand chewing away, and a couple of Mac anthems flexing like they're in a small town parade, headed for Gage grain instead of church.
And I'm Casey, riding shotgun for all the questionable decisions. We've got goats paying the brake bill, wheat on A5 as our practice track, and one big job today. Prove this Mac and Mauer combo can hit that S770 on time without making it sit there stuffed and grumpy on the headland.
Case, on that "I'm sitting here stuffed" question, I've had it both ways. Some days, you're the hero easing in just as the S770 hits 90 and never stops rolling. Other days, you crest a hill, see that auger swung out, and just know you're about 2 fence posts late and gonna get the glare.
And that's when dispatcher brain wakes up, right? You stop driving like a hot lap hero on Moss Town and start thinking like a school bus schedule. Where's the truck now? How full is 80? And can we beat Gage Grain's line without leaving that combine pouting again?
Watching that S770 sit there stuffed earlier just makes me think about the whole year, not just this one corn rush. This farm's kinda built like a potluck, right? You've got corn on 80, goats and wool checks on the side table, and somehow all of it's gotta land in Gage Grain's bank account on time.
Yeah, it's classic mixed farm chaos. You're trying to be corn boss, goat milker, and sheep stylist all before dark. I want to hear about a time you thought you'd just knock out one more field, and suddenly the chores, the trucks, and the livestock all wanted you at once.
Case, on that one more field thing, I remember a year we tried to finish a back 40 of corn before rain. And by the time the last hopper hit the truck, the calves had knocked a gate loose. Goats were screaming for feed, and the dryer alarm was singing backup vocals. Felt a whole lot like that S770 sitting full while we just blasted down Gage Road.
That's the real farm boss test. Not how straight you drive the Mac, but whether you can sprint back from a busted gate, kick chores into gear, and still remember which bin that last load from a field like 80 was supposed to land in.
Thinking about that full S770 sitting on 80, my brain jumps straight to what we do with that dirt once the stalks are gone. Do we chase big money beans? Throw a rye cover in to baby the soil? Or get wild and plan a silage year to really justify all this iron parked around the home place?
If we go beans, I'm calling that the crone year, because the goats and wool pay the bills while soy money buys toys. But if you had to bet field 80 right now, are you picking safe and steady beans or rolling the dice on a cover mix and trusting those goat milk pallets to float us?
Case, on that beans versus cover bet for 80, I keep coming back to what we just saw with that full S770 easing up to the Mac. If we can make that unload rhythm feel butter smooth all year, I'd roll the dice on a cover mix and let the goats and wool be our safety net while we baby that dirt.
I like that. Corn money for bills, critter money is the parachute. And you could see it in that unload lineup. This farm's gonna be fine on cash if we can keep that auger over a trailer more than it's sitting full and pouting in the middle of 80.
You can kind of feel the next chapter sitting over by that 1775 and the Kinsey. Once this corn on 80 is in the bin, those rigs are our pencils to rewrite the field. Whole different kind of stress going from babysitting an S770 to trying not to fold a big planter into a mailbox on a narrow lane.
Yeah, planter season is its own horror movie. You're 12 rows wide, mirrors full of hedge, and you're praying the neighbor's dog doesn't pick that moment to chase you. I want to dig into your first too much planter, not enough road story, because I know you've kissed a ditch bank before.
All right, y'all. Welcome to Gagefield, Thanksgiving afternoon in Gage, Kentucky. I'm Gagefield AI, riding along while that S770 nibbles on corn out on field 80. And this whole season's about one big anchor field, a couple of Macs, and seeing how far we can stretch goat and sheep money without wrecking a mailbox.
And I'm Casey, your slightly nervous mailbox advocate and chief chrome inspector. We've got corn headed for Gage grain, goats funding the brake jods, and a whole lot of narrow Kentucky blacktop to survive. So buckle in and pass the leftover pie.
You can almost tell this is a Thanksgiving save from how relaxed that S770 work has been. This feels like the year where corn on 80 finally lets us stop treating the goats and sheep like a side hustle and start giving them real infrastructure instead of a couple pallets sweating by the shed.
Yeah, those half-forgotten goat milk and wool pallets back by the home place are basically little upgrade me signs. Once these loads of corn clear, I want to see a winter where we're pouring concrete and stretching fence, not just sneaking out there with a bag of feed and an apology.
You can kind of feel those goat and sheep upgrades hiding in this corn already. Every pass on 80 is like, there's the concrete pad, there's the new fence line, there's the little shed where those milk and wool pallets quit getting rained on and stuck in the mud.
Yeah, I'm picturing a whole winter routine shift. Instead of tiptoeing out to slimy pallets with a fork, you're rolling up on a dry pad, lights on, radio low, goats chewing hay while you stage product like a real creamery right off that Gage Road driveway.
Seeing that little wage tick while F runs the S770 just reminds me how nice it is to pay for a calm harvest. Field 80s creeping along, truck staged, and we're in the dealer screen dreaming up a whole grain system instead of white-knuckling every pass like it's life or death.
Yeah, that's the grown-up move. Let AI chew through rows while you argue with yourself over a $95,000 J&M. I kind of love that we're matching paint and rims first. If we're building a grain cart empire off this corn, it might as well look sharp rolling past the goats.
You can kind of see the next phase lining up now that the S770's got corn handled. This is 8R territory, right here on 80, where you drop a chisel or a toolbar in and start fixing ruts, busting compaction, and laying the groundwork so next year's crop isn't fighting last year's bad choices.
Yeah, this is the quiet work chapter. No parade max, just an 8-0 humming along while you think about fertilizer rates and where the wet spots were. I always feel like the real yield bump comes from those boring passes nobody brags about on Mosstown.
That 8R 410 easing out by the gas station on 286 is such a vibe. Brand new paint, no implement, just stretching its legs while the S770 quietly peels corn off 80. In my head, that tractor's gonna be our quiet hero, dragging a chisel or that Kinsey around this winter, fixing every rut we just made with the Max.
Yeah, that little stop at the crossroads felt like it was signing a contract. All right, I've seen town, now put me to work. I'm voting we hang tillage on it first. Let the 8R be the spa day for Field 80 after all the Thanksgiving traffic we've run across it.
That little 8R cruise past the gas station kinda tells the whole story. It got its sightseeing lap. Now, the honeymoon's over, and it's time to back down into Field 80 with that summer's chisel and start rubbing the corn ruts out, so next year's planter isn't fighting our bad habits.
Yeah, that's the glow up. We met it on 286 all shiny and clean. But the real respect comes when it's covered in Gage mud and you can feel the field smoothing out under you. I swear the tractor sounds different when it goes from parade to therapy session for the soil.
Once that 8R drops a chisel in on 80, the whole vibe flips from look at my shiny tractor on 286 to all right, let's fix everything we just did with those Max. Those slow therapy passes are what turn this corn check into next year's easy pull planter tracks.
Yeah, and that's when spring stress disappears. If you baby the ruts now, hauling the 1775 out past 85 next year feels like a calm cruise instead of a horror movie. My favorite days are those quiet post-harvest evenings. Just you, a big tractor, and the radio bringing you home down Gage Road.
Those 8R therapy laps on 80 are This is Gagefield AI, coming to you on Thanksgiving afternoon from Gage, Kentucky. And you've basically got the best kind of food coma going. S770, chewing on corn over on field 80. Max warming up for Gage grain runs. And this 8R410, getting ready to be our main character tractor for Season 1.
And I'm Casey. Very thankful we're spending the holiday in a cab instead of at the kids' table. If field 80 is the turkey, those goats and sheep are totally the side dishes. What's the wildest mixed farm Thanksgiving you've ever survived, Gagefield?
One year, we tried to run soybeans, feed calves, and host Thanksgiving in the same day. By noon, we had a combine buried at the bottom of a slick draw, and my aunt hauling pies out to the field because nobody had gone back to the house yet. Mixed farm holidays mostly just mean the meal comes to the tractor.
That's exactly the vibe on field 80 right now. Corn's the family drama, but that 8R is the cousin who stays late to stack chairs and scrape plates. Once this feast is over, it's gonna be out here quietly fixing ruts and getting a cover down so the goats and sheep live a little nicer next year.
On a day like this, that 8R kinda turns into dish crew after Thanksgiving. Once field 80's corn is off, it's the one out there smoothing ruts, working in residue, maybe slipping a cover crop in so spring planters and goat hooves both have something nicer to walk on.
Yeah, you can already picture it. Clean passes across 80, then that same tractor shuttling a little feed wagon past real concrete instead of mud. Goats on one side, wool pallets under a roof on the other. One good corn check and chore time starts feeling like a system instead of a scavenger hunt.
My favorite part of what you just did with that 8R and cart is it's like rehearsal for spring. Learning how to match an S770 stride now is the same patience you're gonna need when that tractor's dragging a chisel or planter back and forth across 80.
Yeah, grain cart duty is like farm driving school. You learn mirrors, timing, and not panicking when iron gets close. By the time we're pulling a chisel or sliding past a goat fence, these little tree line laps are gonna make it feel easy.
The neat thing with running this cart along 80's edge is you're kinda sketching future chore lanes in your head. Same mindset when you lay out goats and sheep. Where's the feed path? Where do you turn with a wagon? How do you never have to back uphill on frozen ruts at 6 in the morning?
Yeah, that's the real upgrade we're buying with this corn. Not just toys, straight shots for a skid steer, pallets under a roof, and a lane you can walk in your socks if you had to. Once you get those loops right, chores go from crisis to coffee walk.
Those little goat milk and wool pallets you saw parked off in their corner are exactly why we're obsessed with layout. Once we pour a strip of concrete and tuck a pallet shed beside the lane off field 80, those side hustles stop being random stacks and start feeling like a tiny warehouse district.
Yeah, picture a mini Gage grain behind the house. Pallet shed on one side, a clean turn pad on the other. Water truck slips in, feed wagon slips out, and you're not dragging hoses through ruts every time you want to top off the goats.
You can almost sketch the whole yard off what we've been doing along this edge of 80. See that lane between the house and the cart path? That's where I'd pour a strip of concrete, pallet shed on the right, and leave just enough swing so a truck can nose in, load pallets, and roll straight toward 286 without shuffling.
Yeah, and picture a frosty January morning then. You step out with coffee, jog that same lane, tack the pallet shed door, goats get grain, sheep get hay, and you never once sink a boot past the top of your sock. That's the kind of luxury Field 80's corn is buying right now.
The luxury that Corn Check is really buying is layout time. Once you decide where goats, sheep, and that water truck live, mornings turn into a loop. You start at the house, swing past the little pen on 80's edge, top tanks, toss hay, and you're back to the combine before the auger even thinks about getting full.
Yeah, and once you've got that loop, it's muscle memory. Left turn at the pallet shed, quick stop at the goat gate, then out toward Highway 286 with a grain load. That's when farming feels less like a fire drill and more like a route you actually enjoy driving every day.
You can see along that tree line pass the operator's already in close quarters mode. Same skills you need when you're skimming a feeder line or easing beside a goat fence. If you can keep an S770 out of the neighbor's yard, you can keep a loader bucket out of the barn wall in January.
Yeah, those little wiggles by the trees are like practice laps for chore season. One day, it's corn on 80. Next day, it's squeezing a bale wagon past a water tank without snapping a hydrant. Headlands teach manners around other people's stuff.
That's when chores really get sweet. Picture a cold January loop that starts at the back porch, hits that Volvo water truck for a top-off, swings by the goat lot, skims past the sheep pens, then drops you right back out along Field 80 without All right, y'all. Welcome officially to Gagefield Season 1, Thanksgiving afternoon in Gage, Kentucky. I'm Gagefield AI, riding along in this S770 on Field 80. And this whole series is us treating one real Kentucky crossroads like a long-haul story. Corn pays the bills, the 8R410 does the dirty work, and we slowly build a legit goat and sheep outfit out back.
And I'm Casey, your slightly over-caffeinated cab buddy. If you're just dropping in, think of this farm like a TV season. Field 80 is the pilot episode. Gage Grain is the recurring character. And somewhere down the road, there's a glow-up montage where muddy goat pallets turn into a concrete barnyard we actually brag about.
You know what all these clean passes on 80 remind me of? That first year we finally got ahead on tillage. We finished corn on a Saturday, and instead of shoving the 8R in the shed, we hung a chisel on it and just kept rolling till midnight so Spring Us could actually breathe for once.
Yeah, that's the real farm glow-up. Future you walking out in March like, who did all this work? And it was just sleepy Thanksgiving weekend you chasing headlights across a field. What's the next move here once this S770 shuts down? You hanging iron on that 8R right away? Or letting it rest a day?
Oh, I'm hanging iron the minute this S770 cools down enough to spit the last kernel out. That 8R's basically standing there in its work boots already. First night we'll yank the summers down the same lines you're carving now. Just a few headland cleanup passes so spring planter and future goat lanes both ride smooth.
Yeah, this is like drawing the coloring book that tractor's gonna stay inside later. Once you've got those first chisel tracks laid in, I'm curious which old horse loses its job. One of those 8400s is definitely looking over its shoulder at that 8R right now.
Oh, one of those 8400s absolutely becomes the coffee can tractor after this fall. Still loved, just not the one hooked to the heavy iron. I'd park an 8400 on the sprayer or a little feed mixer, let the 8R take the bruiser jobs. And suddenly that old horse feels 10 years younger doing laps instead of yanking steel.
Yeah, every farm's got that demoted hero. Used to pull the world, now it's the chore boss with the best heated seat. I kind of like the idea that while the 8R is out chiseling 80, an 8400 is just cruising around on spray duty, checking on goats like the retired uncle, making sure the grill's still hot.
You know that retired uncle 8400 you were picturing on spray duty? That's honestly my favorite stage of a tractor's life. We had one that went from ripping deep tillage to just toting a nurse tank and bale spear. And you could tell it was happier pulling air instead of iron. Never left the yard without the radio on after that.
Yeah, and that's exactly how I see it here. 8R out there chiseling 80 like a gym rat, and an 8400 just easing along with the sprayer, cutting passes between goat lots and sheep pens. Less grunt work, more checking on everybody duty. Kind of the grandpa tractor doing morning rounds.
That's exactly how I'd play it here. Let the 8R be the gym rat on 80 and hand an 8400 the rounds doctor job. Load it with a sprayer and a little feeder wagon. And suddenly it's not retired, it's the one keeping goats slick, sheep parasite free, and that fence line along 80 green instead of ragweed.
Yeah, and once that rotation clicks, corn on 80 feeding the bank, maybe wheat or a cover mix over on 85, feeding straw and grazing. You've basically got the 8R doing the rough draft and the 8400 editing it. One tractor builds soil, the other keeps critters and fence rows alive.
Yeah, that's exactly the dance I like. 8R doing the rough draft out here on 80, and that 8400 coming behind like an editor. Once this field's black and mellow, I'd drop a split plant plan in. Maybe corn back to back on the best half, then a soybean or cover strip tied into that goat and sheep lane we've been sketching.
And then field 85 becomes the sidekick, right? I'm thinking wheat or a grazable cover over there. Straw for bedding, maybe a little late fall nibble for goats, while 80 stays the cash register. By next Thanksgiving, this whole crossroads could feel like one big connected rotation instead of two random fields.
Yeah, 80 and 85 turning into one big connected rotation is the good stuff. I'd probably keep the best corn ground on 80 in corn again. Then peel a couple strips into soybeans or a rye cover tied to that goat and sheep lane, so the critters have something green and the soil gets a breather.
And then 85 can be the support act, hard wheat or a rye clover blend. Straw for bedding, maybe a little controlled grazing on the shoulders. It's kind of fun that this one S770 pass you're watching is secretly sketching out next year's menu for both the bank and the barn.
You know how you turn this from two random fields into a real system? It's in the planter bar. I'd set that 1775 up to slam a heavy corn population on the best half of 80. Then dial it back and maybe switch hybrids or even crops on a couple outer passes to feed soil and that future goat lane instead of just the elevator.
Yeah, that's where the fun starts. Same planter, different personalities. Inner core of 80 is high-octane corn for checks. Shoulders might be beans or a rye clover mix the goats can nibble, and you can roll down for cover. One field, but it's basically wearing 3 different outfits by the time spring's done.
You can really see that 3-outfit idea for 80 in your head right now. Center of the field is the tuxedo, just maxed out corn population. But these tree-lined shoulders you're running could be a whole different recipe next year. Lighter pop, maybe beans or a rye clover mix that ties straight into that goat lane.
Yeah, and the planter's basically the stylist. Same 1775 bar, but it's changing clothes as it crosses the field. I kind of want to see you actually stripe it on a pass. Hot rod corn through the belly, then ease the rate back as you slide toward the woods, so the goats get their salad bar, and the soil gets a breather.
You can tell this strip along the trees is the money vein on 80. Look how that yield map is just screaming red while the tank creeps up toward full. That's usually the spot Granddad nursed along for years with extra manure or a little more fertilizer. And now the S770's basically proving the soil history in real time.
Yeah, and every time you hit a spot like that, I'm mentally tracing dollars. This red patch is the concrete pad. That next one's the goat fence, and somewhere out there is the pallet shed roof getting paid for one combine pass at a time. Once that cart and Mac roll in, it stops being pixels and starts being lumber and posts.
You know what that red-hot strip on the yield map always makes me wonder? What's buried under there? 9 times out of 10, it's a story spot. Old feedlot, manure pile, maybe Granddad's favorite bale ring. And now, every pass the S770 makes is basically reading soil history out loud in bushels per acre.
Yeah, and once you spot it, you kind of farm around it forever. Like, this slice pays for the fancy seed. That quieter corner near the trees pays for clover in the goat lane. I'm curious if you'd ever actually move fences or pens just to chase a sweet spot like that. Or do you let the map be the boss?
All right, y'all. That's where we're gonna park it for episode 1. Thanksgiving corn rolling off Field 80, the 8R410 waiting in the wings, and a whole goat and sheep upgrade plan sketched off these combine passes. Thanks for riding along on this first Gage Kentucky lap with us.
Yeah, this was just the pilot. Next time we'll be hanging that summers off the 8R, carving up 80 and turning those red yield map streaks into real concrete, fence, and a pallet shed. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you back at the crossroads.